Okay, so I think we've got everybody in now, and it's nearly 7:05. So I haven't got a lot to say. I just wanted to say thank you very much to Cecile Wright for agreeing to act as our chair for this evening. I'm the normally chair these meetings, but it's more appropriate this evening to have Cecile do that. So if I can hand over to Cecile for the rest of the evening, I get the night off. I just get to watch and participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thanks to Joe for inviting me along this evening. I feel particularly privileged because there are some real excellent pioneering people in this participant list, and I don't see what I can add, but I'm looking forward to hearing from the participants. Just for those who didn't attend the excellent AGM for Labour Women Leading last Saturday, it was a riveting AGM, I have to say. Even the bit where we were doing the rule change on the Constitution engendered a fantastic debate about issues of justice. And I was pleased to be elected as the Vice Chair for Labour Women Leading. So thank you all, sisters in the chat, who came along to the meeting and elected me as Vice Chair. What can I say about 2020? Well, 2020 has been an unprecedented year, and one of the unprecedented ongoing issue that is seared into our daily life is the COVID situation, how it is handled or not particularly handled, and the disparity of the impact of this disease on women and on women, Black women in particular, in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of getting the disease, but on women per se, the fact that those that are likely to lose their livelihood as a result of how this disease, how badly it has been handled. So those that are likely to suffer disproportionately are likely to be women. The other unprecedented matter of 2020 is the fact that it has been marked by conversations about Black rights. The conversations about Black lives have emanated through the Black Lives Matter movement that facilitated, I would say, the mass protest at the killing of George Floyd in the US, and how that is that me?
Similar to how Pep does it, they want to press from the front because you're further away from your own goal, and that's what it affects a lot better.
Themselves, please, other than Cecile.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I was just saying the killing of George Floyd and how that ignited globally, nationally, and no doubt within your own cities in the West Midlands, led people taking to the streets to basically raise their horror and concern at this racial injustice. So conversations for racial injustice have become more relevant now more than ever. Just to say, in respect to Black Lives Matter, the movement or the organisation arose out of women in 2013 coming together in the US to voice their concerns about the experiences of Black men within the US. So in particular, it was a response in 2013 to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murder, the person who murdered Trayvon was acquitted, and that sparked deep consternation in the US, and out of that came the Black Lives Matter Foundation. And this foundation, and the movement is a derivative of the foundation, is a global organization in the US, in the UK, and Canada, and elsewhere. And the purpose of this organization is to eradicate oppressive practices and violence inflicted on the Black communities by the state, as it were. And I think what is salient today is that this organization and its purpose arose out of women coming together to proactively create a means by which we can intervene to address issues of systemic, endemic, and institutional racism that blights the lives of Black people in British society, in the US, in Birmingham, in Derby where I live, and elsewhere within the country. So I will say no more at this point and go straight to our speakers. I believe that the first speaker is Mahmouda. Am I correct? She can't hear me.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, Mahmouda.
Yes, okay, so when you're ready, please, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Speak when you can.
Okay. I'm a mother of 3 children. They're all grown up, well, pretty much. And I live quite an active life as a trustee of Islamic Society of Britain. I'm also a governor at Bishop Weasley's Grammar School. I have a regular radio show on Unity FM called Connecting Communities. I'm also involved on a voluntary basis with the Joe Cox Foundation and building up a more in common group here in Birmingham. On top of all of that, I work 1 day a week with Ella Baker School of Organising, which I will go into a bit later on. And I also work 4 days a week as a programme coordinator for Faith and Belief Forum for the West Midlands. Now, as a Muslim, why do I do what I'm doing? What motivates me? What keeps me going? Do I need to spend all this time, a lot of it on a voluntary basis as well, to do the things that I do? You know, several years back, I coordinated a series of events as part of something called Islam Awareness Week. There were lots of myths that people had about Islam, and I was just so keen to dispel those myths through those events. And while I was doing that event, there was a comment that was made by somebody saying, well, who wasn't a Muslim, and he said, well, you know, you're involved, we come to your events organized by the Muslim community, but you never do that the other way around. You never come to some of our events. And it did make me reflect, and I did think that, yes, why is the community not so active in outside our own community? It really made me think things in a different way. It made me reflect, and then there was no restrictions from the faith at all. In fact, from my faith perspective, I'm encouraged to be an active citizen, and it's my duty as a Muslim to stand up for what's right, not just for Muslims, but for people of all faith and all background. And to see so much injustice around the world, why should I not stand up against it and strive towards a positive change in society? The more I got involved in the wider society, the more I felt drowned in how much we could do as a diverse community and impact that we could have on people. And how it makes you realize the strength in numbers, that if, regardless of what background we're from, if we're in large numbers, those large numbers can be very, very strong, have a great impact. And people can see the injustice happening around them, but feel helpless and don't know how to go about making a positive change. And from my experience and as a community organizer for the past couple of years now, I just feel that people need a little nudge. The people are perfectly capable of making sure things happen, being involved. They have so many skills that they could bring to the table, but they just need a bit of encouragement and empowerment to be reassured that they can make a difference. Now, Ella Baker is my work one day a week, and Ella Baker is named after the school. It's an organizing school. It's Ella Baker School of Organizing. We draw some of our inspiration from the African American freedom struggle and what they described as freedom schools. So, as you might know, in the 1950s in the USA, Black people were entitled to register to vote, but were prevented by a combination of physical threats up to and including murder by laws selectively applied and designed to keep African Americans off the ballot. Now, one such law required voters, when they registered to vote, to read and then explain a section of the American Constitution. At the time, relatively few African Americans, particularly in the rural areas, had any real schooling and so often could not pass this test. Septima Clark, I'm sure you must have heard of her, the first freedom schools. These were pop-up schools where people were taught to read before they sought to register to vote. And there was an expectation that everyone they taught would themselves become a teacher, which is where the slogan, each one, teach one, comes from. And in our work as Ella Baker, this is what we actually do. And we're not for-profit training organization, it's grown out of our experience of trade union, community and anti-racist organizing. And the part of the school's ethos is that communities, however they're defined, can find their own solutions. Our role is to introduce some ideas and generate a discussion that allows course attendees to think through for themselves the answers that fit the needs of their community. Now, being an organizer for so many years, there's no way I can, currently I'm working in Dudley and trying to build communities there. And there's no way I can go into Dudley and tell them how to organize because the community is different, the environment is different, the people are different, the culture is different. No matter how much we think there is similarity, there's always different contexts that we need to familiarize ourselves with. So we're really reestablishing and politicizing the culture of activist education and training to encourage transformative union and community organizing for a more democratic, more equal and more sustainable world. So debates on progressive politics are often too focused on what we want or what we are against, and too seldom focused on how we build the power to achieve our aspirations. We're developing imaginative new training materials based on concrete examples of struggles here in the UK. When the whole issue happened with the Black Lives Matter with Floyd, then this is when we came up with a training that we delivered on Black Lives Matter and the history of where it all comes from. And this is one of those things that we actually deliver as well. And I think Jean and I think Chris they've both been to the training that we've delivered. So we're making them widely available online and encouraging our movement to review and develop them through a process of open sourcing. They're free to download. You can adapt them to suit your needs and your audience. And we're recruiting and training a mass of committed community industrial organizers, and training 10s or 20s simply won't do. We need a program that can train literally thousands of people in the techniques that can help them organize their communities or workplaces. So we're therefore building a volunteer network of trained facilitators who can deliver training to local community, political and trade union groups. So in summary, we want to develop a fantastic training material, train community activists in how to use them, and then network those trained organizers so they can learn from each other's experiences. So we need to see the bigger picture sometimes. And I think sometimes we get so engrossed in the internal politics that we struggle to confront what the reality is. And I think one of my teachers actually put it so well in the form of a cake. And he said, you know, think about a cake, and the rich man comes and takes a big chunk of the cake and leaves a slice behind. And he says to the rest, takes that away, and with that slice behind, he says to the rest, this is for you. Don't let the others have it. So sometimes we see that, and then for them to be able to retain their position, they're making other people argue between themselves and further polarizing communities. And I'm sure as activists, we're already aware of that. And I think sometimes we need to step back and think, who are the real people, perpetrators? So sometimes I feel I have no choice but to organize myself and encourage other people to respond to the negativity that's portrayed about the other and polarization of our communities. And I've got Jean, who's already part of our local Ella Baker group that we formed a couple of weeks ago. And we had our first training actually on Monday, on Black Lives Matter as well. So if any of you are interested, not only are you're more than welcome to join us nationally, but local group we've actually formed, and we've got a few people on there as well. And we're looking for people to join us so we can further this work. Further, and so we can tweak the trainings to suit the people here in Birmingham. So the more diverse people we have, the more effective we can be by learning and supporting one another to make a positive difference in our communities. I'll end it here.
Okay. Thank you so much for that presentation, Mahmouda. I understand that you will have to leave us, so I would suggest, if there are one or two quick questions that you want to ask, I mean, ideally I would have liked all speakers to have spoken and then questions, but the fact that you have to leave us, can I ask participants if you have any quick questions you wish to ask before Mahmouda leaves? Also, perhaps Jean, you said that Jean has participated in some of your activities, so perhaps questions that are directed to the Ella Baker School and its role in assisting, empowering and tooling up activists. Perhaps Jean could assist us later on in the actual discussion.
Yeah, and Cecile, I can stay a bit longer than I previously thought, so I can stay up until 8 o'clock.
Okay, that's good, that's good. Okay, the next speaker is Maureen. I hope I've got it in the right order. Maureen Scott Douglas. Maureen, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah,
yes, I can.
Please, yep, when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Number one, I'd like to thank Joe for inviting me. And one of the things which attracted me to this event was the title, Black Women Matter. And I thought, wow, I should have thought of that one myself. So great title, and pleased to be a part of it. Now, I was given a brief to talk about myself and how I got into activism. So I thought that's not too hard. I didn't have to research too much, but I thought it'd be quite nice because it's not very often I get to speak about myself. So I'd just like to say, Maureen Scott Douglas. I was born in Walsall, born to immigrant parents who came here from Jamaica in the 60s, where we always lived in Walsall in the equivalent of a bedsit whilst I was young, up to the age of 7. My father worked as a moulder, my mother worked as a machinist. That was in this country. And, very humble upbringing. We didn't have much, but when I was 7, we got our first council house. and it was quite a challenging area of Walsall. We thought we were really well off, and that was only because both parents worked. And on my street, not many people worked. So there was one family, they used to have my cast-off trainers or my pumps. Anything that, if I was going to get a new pair, some of the kids would line up to get my old pair. So, you know, in that context, I do know what hardship is like. And at the same time, it wasn't easy for us, because there was 3 of us who were born in this country, and my parents had another 4 children who were born back in the Caribbean. And every 2 or 3 years, they would send for one. So their money was always stretched. They left the children with my mother's parents. So, you know, her working life was always quite challenging, because everything my mum and dad earned, they had to sort of send half of it back home and then try and build their life here. And then they were still having children at the same time. Thank goodness for contraception. And so it wasn't, I didn't feel poor, because my mother used to make our clothes, and my dad worked at night, so I dare say he got a little bit more than average. And then, as I say, we lived on a street where not many people worked. So, you know, I went to a decent school, but I didn't get the results which I deserved. And that was, reasons were multiple. Some of it, when I look back, there was some racism in my school. And I mean, even when I was at junior school, I was highlighted to take the grammar school test. But the teacher wanted me to take it, but the head teacher, she didn't want me to take the grammar school test. So I went to the local, well, not quite the local, I went to, for those of you who are Walsall, like Andrea, I went to Bluecoat, which was seen as a highly prestigious school at the time. Now, I could have got much better results than I did, but education wasn't necessarily my priority, and I didn't do as well as I could have done. So when I left school, that was 79, 80, there wasn't much work around, and I sort of had little part-time casual jobs, went on sort of the job opportunity scheme, and ended up doing another scheme, worked as a painter and decorator until I got a job at a factory. And it's quite ironic that Andrea and I were campaigning just around the corner from that factory. I worked at Crabtrees, and I worked there for about 4 years. But during that time, I started to become active, and my first example of activism was when I was, I think, about 17, 18, and you probably all heard of the New Cross fire, where 13 people were set ablaze in a house in London. And there was a demonstration in London, and that was in 1981. So that was the first demo I'd ever been to. And I really got a really good buzz from it, you know, still a teenager. And as I say, by then I started working in the factory and stayed there for quite a few years. But whilst I was there, started taking up some evening classes and adding to my GCSEs, well, sorry, my O-levels. I think I had 4 O-levels, but I needed a couple more to sort of take, you know, my big plan. So when I left, I was made redundant in 1987. I was made redundant from there, and I went to an adult residential college, and then I went to university. But during the time whilst I was there, in Walsall, there was an organisation which I was a founder member of called Walsall Black Sisters. And we used to meet every Sunday, just a group of black women. We used to meet in one of the neighbourhood offices. Had no idea about what a meeting was, what an organisation was. And, you know, one of the women used to bring a copy of Spare Ribs, and we'd borrow it. We'd use it like a little library, and people would put their little books in and we'd take them away and read and come back and say what we'd read about. We practiced being a chair, practiced getting active. And today that organisation still exists. And it's still Walsall Black Sisters, and I'm now the chair of that organisation. I've been the chair for about 6 years. I'm trying to pass it on to somebody else, but we have been able to develop quite a lot of the women in the interim. So that's been, you know, a good experience, and that's sort of where I cut my teeth in terms of activism. Now, as I said, in '88, I went to university to do an economics degree. And whilst at university, again, I became a real strong student activist. I think my first thing was getting herbal teas, getting herbal tea into the canteen, because I was in Wales and it's like they'd never heard of herbal tea. So I sort of set up my little campaign about getting herbal teas onto the site. So that worked really well. Then I, you know, ran for one of the student offices. I was in the Women's Society. I was in all sorts of things, which again led me into good stead into where I am now. Because, you know, leaving university, I worked for an education charity. Again, a charity where, you know, you have to have a lot of commitment to work within a community organisation, because often there's not much money around. And then I worked for a college. I was teaching at a college for a few years. And I left there to work for a local council. Now, after teaching at a college and working for a local council, no offence to anyone, but I did have a lot more time on my hands, and that's where I really got involved with the trade union. It wasn't the union I'm in now, but I got involved, and I was based in a library at the first instance. I worked in the library. And I got there, and there were already 3 reps in the library. So it was like, oh, you can't be a rep here. So I looked for another position within the branch structure. And, you know, working with the trade union was a real good eye-opener, because everybody should belong to a trade union, especially, well, if you're working especially, to look after your rights and to progress things within your workplace, your pay, your maternity, etc. They say you all know. And at that time as well, I became, well, before then, I became involved with the Labour Party. And I live in Sandwell, and I was involved with Sandwell's Labour Party. You know, we used to have our meetings around each other's houses. So it was like a little cheese and wine party every month. And somebody'd come with their wine and, oh, I've got a bottle of wine, you must taste this, and so on. So we'd have our samples of cheeses and wines after the meetings. And, you know, been quite active within Sandwell's Labour Party and stood for council a few times. Back before I really got involved, when I just started working for Unite, which is 16 years ago, I used to stand for certain seats, which I wasn't selected, and, you know, I can categorically say that I should have been selected for those seats. because I know that I had the ability, I was more than capable, I'm bright, intelligent, all the rest of it. But one seat I did apply for, and I was told that that was a white seat that was within our party. So hopefully those days have gone. But, you know, I don't regret any of that. And I worked for Unite for 16 years. The first 4 years I was a learning organizer, and then I became an officer and women and equalities officer. So, you know, it's quite an extensive job, because I get involved with organising women, organising disabled members, Black, Asian, ethnic minority, and lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans plus members. And again, just to say that where I'm wanted, I'll try to make myself available. If the individuals around me, I try to encourage them to get involved in if, you know, the union may not be suitable for them, but it may be some other civic role, or in the community, or in the neighbourhood watch, or as a school governor. You know, I'm very much in support of women getting involved in different things. Yes, you may have children. Some of you will know or would have heard about Lynn Baird. She's a very strong West Midlands Unite activist, and her son sadly, tragically was stabbed a couple of years ago. And Lynn has had 8 children, and I always use her as an example of, don't let children put you off from being active. Because even though she lost her son, she got involved in an initiative where she's produced like a stab kit. So if people get stabbed, they can use this kit to help save their lives. And she just won a West Midlands award, and quite a lot of awards. And it just shows that sometimes we as women say we use our children, or I've got my husband, or I've got my partner, and use it as an excuse. But we shouldn't. There's still something we can do, even if it's that. If it's children, you think that are stopping you from doing things, get involved with your children's school. You know, if you say that you're not working, or a union's not for you, or politics isn't for you, get involved in your neighbourhood. You got your political involvement, you got trade union involvement, plus other things. So that's all I want to say for today. And thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope somebody has gained something from what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Fascinating journey into activism. Absolutely fascinating. Your resilience, your focus, the way in which you have used critical moments in your life, to not only elevate yourself, empower yourself, but empower others, be it through your learning struggles, be it through your precarious working situation, being a member of the Labour Party, and currently your role, your senior position within one of the major trade unions in this country. Fascinating journey, absolutely fascinating. And thank you for sharing your resilience. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Our next speaker is Sarah Chevalier. I hope I've pronounced it correctly. Is that correct? No, I've got Jane Krishnaras here. Why has Jane come up? It's supposed to be Sarah. Have I got the right person, Sarah?
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. You are a Black Lives Matter activist based in Stoke and North Staff. When you're ready, please, Sarah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm very honoured to be here tonight among such dynamic women doing amazing things in their communities and their respective regions. My name's Sarah Chevalo and I am from Stoke-on-Trent. I am founder and leader of Black Lives Matter for Stoke, and I also am the founder and chair of the executive committee of Staffordshire Association for Black Lives Equality, which is a not-for-profit unincorporated association which aims to bring about the equality for Black lives within our region. A bit of my background: I was born in Stoke-on-Trent in the 80s. I am actually third generation British. My grandparents came over in the Windrush generation, and my parents were born here and settled in Stoke, and that's where I was born. Very sort of strong and proud heritage, Jamaican heritage, very strong cultural links. I always grew up with a real pride in my Black identity, even though Stoke was and still is a very predominantly white area. The Black community makes up 1.4%, just to give you some idea. And growing up, we did suffer a lot of racism, overt and otherwise. But our parents always gave myself and my siblings a real sort of sense of pride in ourselves. And we were always taught that our voice was important, and that if we had something to say, if we thought something was wrong, we must speak out, as I often did, sometimes getting myself into bother at school, but other times gaining respect from not only my peers, but also teachers and other caregivers. I would say that my journey into activism, I was trying to think about this earlier when I was thinking about the meeting later, came when I got to secondary school, and they wanted to select a year representative to represent the year and, you know, whatever our needs were or wants. And I was actually elected by the student body. I think it was to do with the fact that I was quite a big character. I was never afraid to say what was on my mind, and in no small part the fact that I did challenge the teachers. And at that time, it can't be denied, sort of in the late 90s, even sort of the early 2000s, the progression in Stoke-on-Trent to do with race relations was extremely poor. There's always been a strong far-right, racist, anti-Black presence in Stoke, including the National Front, the Naughty 40 and the BNP. Stoke-on-Trent has some quite notorious titles, such as the most Brexited city in the UK, which speaks to a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric that then feeds into racism. And also earlier in the 2000s, I believe it was around 2005, we actually had 10 BNP councillors actually win seats in our council, which is shocking when you think, as a Black child growing up in the 80s, I remember BNP, Blacks Out, Go Back Home scrawled on the homes of family members, friends, community centres. Essentially a hate group was able to gather such support in Stoke-on-Trent, just to give you an idea of how severe and widespread the racism is. But growing up, even experiencing this racism, I can't say it didn't impact on me, because it did, but I didn't allow it to strip me of my identity. And when I felt the need to assimilate, I would always check myself and remember who I was and what was special, and that my Blackness was something that, though it did not define me, it was a very integral part of me, and I've never shied away from that. So moving into adulthood, it was very important for me to become educated. So after taking my A-levels and starting my family, I started my family in the early 20s. I then returned to study for my BSc honours in psychology and counselling. In completion of this, and during the course of university, I became involved in lots of different societies, met lots of different people from all different walks of life. And the culmination of it was in my third year, I took a module in oppression and empowerment. And it was one of the first times that I spoke extremely frankly about the intersectionality of racism, which a lot of people ignore. And I think it's very apt to bring that up in this meeting with women, because very often with racism, it's ignored and it's very blanketed. And the intersectionality that leads to the compound discriminations that Black women face is something that I feel needs much more attention. And so ever since taking that course about oppression and empowerment and bringing that to the attention of people who I have to admit were quite shocked, other white students, Asian students, when I did explain, as a Black woman, I do actually feel the bottom of the rung in society. I feel that my voice is not important to people. I feel that there are so many negative stereotypes and narratives that are trotted out about Black women. You only have to look on the internet at, these videos and memes that get shared. There is such a negative and degrading narrative that is trotted out about Black women continually. And it's very hard to fight against that, because it makes...
We've lost you.
Sorry. Did you mean to mute me, Cecile?
I don't know whether I did. Did I move? I don't know.
Yeah, you did mute me, but
I'm so sorry. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'll continue. People even on nights out would make comments that would be considered microaggressions, which were very racist. People calling, saying, when I'd say, "Oh, my name's Sarah," "Oh, no, you look like a Shaquanda or a Tamika." It's like, it's really unacceptable. And, I think we're very much taught as Black women to shrug it off. Oh, no, don't be oversensitive about it. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. But these things chip away at your character, and they chip away at you, and they reinforce these very negative ideas of Black women and of how Black women are and of how we are perceived and what our worth is. And more recently, I've kind of tried to explain to people that it feeds into sort of a very archaic idea from even slavery, where the Black woman was extremely degraded. She was raped. Her body was a figure of fun. The shape of a Black woman, it was something that became a caricature, even down to, and then we move that forward in time, and we come to now, where you have, cultural appropriation, you have your Kardashians and such people who are making this caricature of the Black woman. We have blackfishing and all this kind of thing. And it's, no matter how much our features may become elevated in the wider media, in pop culture, whatever, on us, they are still that figure of fun. We still are not subscribing to the beauty standard as it exists. And as I say, I know a lot of the time this is trivialized, but as a mother of 3 daughters, I think it's my duty to point this out and to actively fight against this. So with my being the founder of BLM for Stoke, that did coincide with the murder of George Floyd in America. And I just kind of sat back. I'd already attended a couple of protests. And one day I was just sitting in my room on my laptop, and I thought, I'm going to hold a protest, but I'm not going to march. I'm going to hold a protest under the format of that it's going to be educational. I'm going to have poetry. I'm going to have spoken word. There's going to be speeches. And I went ahead. I put it on. At this point, there was no BLM for Stoke. It was just me. And I held this in the town centre, in Hanley Town Centre in Stoke-on-Trent. And I didn't know if 2 people would turn up. I didn't know if 20 would. But in the end, nearly 200 people came. And it was an amazing jump off, because from then onwards, the networking, I would say, that was the end of June, the networking has been crazy. The amount of people I've met through the trade unions, anti-fascist networks, the anti-racism charities and movements. I have to give, mention to Northscarf, really empowered me to move forward with BLM and move forward with what the message meant to me and what I think it means within the UK, which I think is important. I think, the US and the UK, we are worlds apart with, our issues with anti-Black racism. And I think we do need to understand that in order to better things in our society as it stands. So what the issue was that was really quite ridiculous at the time was, I don't know if anyone's heard, we had a Lord Mayor in power of Stoke-on-Trent City Council who had actually shared some extremely offensive, racist Facebook posts. This was the active Lord Mayor, Jackie Barnes. And I'll just put that aside for the minute. This was made worse by the fact that the Deputy Lord Mayor who was poised to take over was an ex-BNP candidate. So no, we were not having that. So that was our campaign, to remove Jackie Barnes as Lord Mayor and make Melanie Baddeley step down. Now, Melanie Baddeley, the Deputy Lord Mayor, who was the ex-BNP candidate, actually stood down a few days after the first protest. So that worked. But the Stoke-on-Trent City Council and the councillors in the cabinet dug their heels in regarding Jackie Barnes and her racist Facebook post. They said she self-referred to an internal complaints agency. After investigating it, that internal complaints agency was actually made up of 9 cabinet members who had all stood behind not only the BNP candidate Melanie Baddeley, but were also supporting Jackie Barnes. So we weren't happy with that, and as a result, we held another protest outside the Civic Centre, and we started an email campaign within our Facebook group. At this point, our Facebook group had probably around 800 members or so, and we appealed to everyone far and wide. We made an email template for them to send to Stoke-on-Trent City Council's leader, Abby Brown, and to Jackie Barnes herself, calling for her resignation for the insult that she had caused to people with her racism. During the course of this campaign, I actually met Jane, who's in the meeting now, Dr. Jane Chrisnardis, who works for CLOC, which is a legal society at Keele University. Now, Jane, amazingly, just the most amazing ally, actually took our campaign to the Justice Board and removed the service of CLOC from Stoke-on-Trent City Council from working for people within Stoke-on-Trent. Her words were that, well, I don't want to encroach too much on what she's going to speak of herself, but her words were, how can she ask her, students, many of them Black, to support, a city council who are being compliant in this racism. So that was a real coup for us, and we just went from strength to strength as BLM for Stoke.
Can I ask you, Sarah, just to sum up now, please? Sorry, if you can.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You.
So basically, if I am to sum up activism, I would just say, get involved, and please don't sort of underestimate these grassroots movements, and don't underestimate what you yourself can do. As women, we are, we're a force to be reckoned with. And even though, the patriarchy is something that we'll never want to accept and give us credit for our contributions to society, if you look within the BLM UK groups, I would say a good 90% of the leaders are actually female. So just do it, go ahead, do it, and support your sisters. let's all support each other. You know, iron sharpens iron. And I have to say, just hearing, you know, everyone speak tonight, it just goes to show what we can achieve if we all just work together and, you know, really stand strong as sisters and empower each other. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry if I have waffled on. I could talk forever about this. But it's been fantastic, and I look forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I hesitated intervening because in our society, black women are voiceless. So it's very, very difficult, painful for me to tell a black woman, can you please sum up, because we don't get the opportunity. And you have raised, in addition to your journey, your activism along the way throughout your life, you've also highlighted some really, really poignant and pernicious issues. And one of them is that black women are still fighting to be women. It is something we struggle with, that we can't, to the recognition that we might be women is something we can't take for granted because of the narrative around being black and being a woman and the history of black women. We're still struggling to be recognized as women. So your point about intersection, and you have done some glorious stuff, innovative stuff, pioneering, and I hope the stuff you're doing around Black Lives Matter is sustainable, because we do need that level of grassroots activism to give people hope and to empower our communities and women, black women in particular. Thank you so much. Okay, if we can go now to our final speaker. I'm not quite sure how long we've got, but our final speaker, and I hope we'll get some time to actually put some questions to our speaker. Our final speaker this evening is Gillian Aridil. Gillian is a women's officer at the City of London and Westminster Labour Party. Gillian is also a member of Labour, the Women Leading Executive. Gillian, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Cecile. Okay, I'm not good. My talk is not going to be as exciting as the previous one. So, but anyway, hopefully there's something here. So yes, I'm a member of the Labour Women Leading. I'm women's officer in my constituency, which is Westminster and Cities of London. So basically, let me just get started here. Sorry. Within the context, I would just say, obviously, it's been said that the Black Lives Matter movement was started by 3 women. So women have been always active. I mean, from you know, prior liberation struggles with the onset of colonialism and imperialism, women have always been very active in those movements, and obviously in the civil rights movement in America and so forth. Even in the Black Panther movement, the majority of members in the 70s were actually women. And we actually had a woman leader from 74 to 1977 in Elaine Brown. Unfortunately, she had to resign due to sexism, but she was a chairwoman for some time. So in the UK, the BLM movement already had a presence here prior to the George Floyd brutal murder. And this country, there was already a history of women protesting and organizing around violence from police brutality or murders, and the inherent structural racism within this society. You know, Black women in particular have taken the lead on those protests, particularly Black mothers of victims. For example, Doreen Lawrence and the lady that Maureen mentioned earlier on. Women have also fought with authorities in an attempt to get action on knife crime, which disproportionately affects Black males, Black boys. The Windrush generation of Black women contributed substantially to the foundation of the National Health Service, and Black women continue to form a major part of the care system in this country. Prior to us joining the European Union in the 70s, It was black women who cleaned all of the offices in central London. Much of the background work for the whole fashion and retail industry was done by black women sewing in the factories in London. However, it is often black women who are at the bottom of the pile in many ways, but mostly in economic terms. They were the last to receive PPE protection in hospitals and in social care. Some were experiencing racism still, even today, within the NHS as staff. They are the major victims of no recourse to public funds and migrant access to health care, even for pregnant women, is denied to them as well. So black women are disproportionately affected by those issues. Now, in the Labour Party, we have some great role models. Obviously, I don't need to say Dawn, Diane, Belle, and several others. But within the whole structure of the Labour Party, it's not necessarily duplicated in terms of the decision-making, policy-making, etc. within the party. They don't normally feature as much. So in most geographical areas, we are not connecting with that community as the Labour Party. And many feel that we do not represent them, particularly in light of comments made by our leader previously, and by the unwillingness to address racism as witnessed in the report, in that famous report, and by the decision to abstain from the vote on the Spy Cops bill, which is going to directly impact the black community. So I think as a party and as a women's group, we need to find ways to reach those women, and we need to include and be actively representative of their interest. In my experience within Westminster, I managed to get funding out of the NEC with the NEC Development Fund for an Arabic-speaking project for Sudanese women, which ran for about a year. And that was a very successful project. Our first meeting had about 25 women, 25 women. We did fortnightly meetings, well attended. I had to adapt the program to accommodate what they wanted rather than what I wanted. They insisted on food has to be provided. That's an African thing. Put some food there and then we'll come and then discuss politics, or, and I had to adapt the program because they were interested in finding out about benefits, finding out about education. So I had to come from where I was approaching it from and incorporate what they wanted and listen to them and adapt accordingly. A very successful meeting that we had for our women's group for Black History Month a couple of years ago was a speaker on Afro World Hair Day. It sounds really random for the Labour Party, but Afro World Hair Day, that was one of the major discussions that we have had in our CRP, because that touched on history, it touched on politics, it touched on everything, the politics of hair, and that brought lots of women in who I'd never seen before. It was a well-attended meeting and they were all engaged, and I almost literally had to throw them out of the meetings. We ran over an hour and couldn't get them out. They were so engaged with that. So the point of that is to get people where they're at. You can take something like hair, which seems so random, and that becomes history, that becomes politics. There's a lot behind that. It leads into other areas. I think we need to do, as a party, we need to do much more outreach to the Black organizations, the Black women organizations, and I've found so many in Westminster that I hadn't even thought about before. There are lots of them there because they have to organize to help themselves. So there's lots of organizations out there, and we have to reach out to them, not expect people to keep coming to us. And that also Black women should be encouraged to take more positions, whether it's councillors, MPs, school governors, whatever. But the main point is to take the position, but to remain grounded in the grassroots community. Because a lot of people, some people will get that promotion into whatever role, and then that's it, you've made it, goodbye. But people need to stay rooted in the grassroots community, as I think Labour Women Lead generally does. So that's basically what I have to say, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gillian. Once again, thank you for sharing with us your own activism within the Labour Party and within your community more generally. And thank you for reminding us that for all the indices of deprivation in this society, Black women feature quite significantly. And thank you for reminding us also about the lack of representation of Black women within the Labour Party structures. You also highlighted quite rightly the need for us to develop and work on an inclusion agenda. Perhaps some of the ideas from the first speakers, the Ella Baker School of Activism, perhaps that could provide us with some tools that we could use to engage Black women, empower Black women, and assist us as Black women to come up with our agenda for intervention and our agenda for change. Okay, on that note, thank you so much. I'd like to open up the meeting now to speakers, to questions, please. Thank you to all our speakers. Please indicate with your hand or whatever if you wish to speak. I can't see everybody if there's any hands up, but I can perhaps, whilst people are wanting to, what question they might want to raise or clarification. I'm looking in the chat here if there's anything posted as such. Are there any questions, any observations? Chris, please. Do I have to? Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Chris Curiata, Sally Oak, Birmingham, co-founder of LWL West Midlands. Just like to say, I'm absolutely flabbergasted. First of all, thank you for a brilliant panel of speakers, by the way. But I can't believe that in Birmingham, which is a massive, very diverse city, that there's so little happening with regards the Labour Party and Black History Month. I don't believe in Black History Month, by the way. I'm a former teacher and we always had Black history on our curriculum in the primary. I taught in Handsworth. I got a great deal of experience with that. That's another subject. But in the Labour Party, when our particular Labour Party found out that we were organising tonight's meeting, all of a sudden they decided they might have one themselves. Now, to me, that is appalling. I can't prove that, of course, but all of a sudden they've got a meeting next week, the last but one day of the month. And I think, is this typical across the country? I would imagine it is, but I don't see how we're going to convince women, or men for that matter, to join the party when this is the way they're being treated. And any suggestions would be greatly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ruth.
Thanks, Cecile. I mean, following on from that, I don't come from, well, I did come from the West Midlands originally, but I'm now in London in Finsbury Park, which is an amazingly diverse area with, it just buzzes, and there are so many community organisations, lots of women's organisations, and I sort of feel very privileged to be involved with some of those. And I've been really, really inspired tonight by all the speakers. I think mainly by the sort of lack of anger and the positivity that all the speakers felt, you know, there is an issue here and we need to do something about it. And I just thought that was amazing. And I'm sort of interested to know how perhaps Mahmouda, I don't know if Mahmouda and Sarah are in the Labour Party, but how they actually perceive the Labour Party and whether they think it's useful to be involved politically as well as in their communities. I know there are other women here who are members of the Labour Party who are actually quite cynical about it, and particularly with the new leadership, but I won't say anything more about that.
Okay, can I have one more and then I will put the issue of the Labour Party, because both speakers so far has spoken about the Labour Party and its the way in which it engages with the issues of black women. Anybody else wish to? Is there Andrea, please? Yeah.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand in the normal way because I'm a co-host to the meeting, so I have to wave at you.
Okay. Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that I was very interested in what Gillian said about we as a Labour Party can't just wait and expect people to come to us, that we need to reach out. And I'm always interested in hearing positive ways to do that, ways that aren't tokenistic, that aren't about saying, oh, we need to have more people from a particular background, so you'd better come. So I'd be very interested to hear more about that. But I also wanted to share with you that I had a conversation with one of our local councillors a while ago, a woman from a BAME background, who said to me, what did I think about the idea of all BAME shortlists? And my answer was that, well, first of all, I don't think it would be for me to have the first opinion on that. But then secondly, that there are issues where when you put a measure in place like an all-women shortlist or an all-BAME shortlist, if that's the only thing that you do to encourage participation, it's not enough, and it's not necessarily a particularly helpful measure. So I'd love to hear what some of our panel members would think about that, if that's possible.
Okay, thank you for those three questions. They all relate to what the state of the play within the Labour Party with respect to black women. The question also relate to what needs to be done, what mechanism, what means of intervention, what forms of engagement. Okay, Gillian, I know you were the last speaker, but do you want to pick up on that? Because I know that you focused on the Labour Party, then I'll go to the other two speakers. Gillian, do you want to say something, please?
Okay, in terms of getting people on board, different communities on board, what I've done in my constituency is to have the meetings like the Afro World Hair Day. I got the founder of that event to come down and speak to people. People in my constituency, like every other constituency, I imagine, are concerned about accommodation, about the housing associations not doing repairs, things that are touching the people in your area that affect them. So if you have a public meeting rather than a Labour Party meeting on such matters that are affecting the local community, then that tends to draw them. That will at least show them that you're interested in what they're going through, and that's an introduction. And then you continue to show by your actions and by what the leader says and what everybody else says that you are actually genuinely representing them. So that would be my answer to that. Sorry, what was the other? Was there something else?
Well, I can put to the others now, Gillian, because you've suggested ways in which one can engage and possibly intervene. Maureen, do you have anything that you want to add to the state of play vis-a-vis black women in the Labour Party, measures for intervening, measures for engaging, what can practically done? Maureen, do you have anything you could add, you wish to say?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there is a big issue, not only black women, but also black men across the Midlands. We need representation across the Midlands. Gillian is quite fortunate that she's in London based, but I know that if somebody like Cecile was in London, she'd be an MP years ago. There is an emptiness when it comes to the Midlands and, well, when it comes to outside of London. In the West Midlands, we've got Teo, but I believe she was from London, who's in Coventry North. We've got no representation from the West Midlands as black MPs, and it's a disgrace. And we have written to Keir Starmer and he hasn't even responded. I know a group of Birmingham councillors, African Caribbean councillors in Birmingham Council wrote to Sir Keir and he did not even respond or acknowledge the letter. There is a big problem and we can't hide it under the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, I don't know, Sarah, would you like to respond? Because I don't know whether Mahmood is still with us. Sarah?
Yes. In terms of that, it's something that does repeatedly seem to keep coming up. I think obviously everyone's aware that Labour has historically been the party of the Black British voter, and obviously with the new leadership and the shift to the right, a lot of those votes will not be coming in. Now, representation does matter, and if we're talking in terms of how do we make that come about, I think the point that someone made about I don't really like the term BAME, but about Black and Asian shortlists, I think that is a good idea. And I think some people may scream tokenism, but there is a difference between tokenism and positive discrimination. And I believe that that difference lies in going into meetings such as this and, you know, gathering sort of people who have certain mindsets who could really add, even if they're not from a political background, who could really actually add something to the Labour Party in terms of that representation because of their lived experiences, because of what goes on in their communities. Just being in touch with your communities is a massive coup. And that's what people are drawn to. That's what the average person is drawn to. They are drawn to people who they believe know what their issues are. They believe know what is important to them. And the fact that there's no representation, very little representation of Black women in the Labour Party, to me, is outrageous. And I think it's something that seriously needs to be looked into. And I'm appalled to hear that Keir didn't reply to that letter that was sent to him, because I have a lot to do with the local Labour groups in Stoke. I've got another meeting with them tomorrow, and it seems that sort of, you know, the lower levels, when you're looking in sort of the branches and things, people are quite eager to have this representation. So we need to ask questions as to why that's not filtering further up. Maybe we need to think bigger, and I don't know, are we not being loud enough? Maybe we need to be louder in calling for this representation. And I don't think it's that people particularly don't want to. I think it's that when people put themselves forward, Black women in particular, when they do put themselves forward, they very quickly shout it down. And that's what I feel that the actual issue is. But I do agree with the shortlist. I think it's a good idea, but I think we need to look further up as to why the representation does not exist, because I don't think it's for lack of sort of Black women with voices, and I don't think it's for lack of people wanting to be involved. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you for that. We're due to finish at 8:30. Are there any quick couple of questions that anyone wished to raise before I ask the speakers just to, Salma, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who's spoken and contributed. Really, really fantastic meeting. It's so important to have a space for women to be able to have these kinds of discussions. I'd be interested in discussing, I guess, how do we move forward with that sense of solidarity as women. Often we can be divided. We know that there's class is an issue. Even within the BAME, you know, that I don't particularly like that label, but there's almost like a brown-black divide and rule that can be set up. In some areas of the country, you can see a lot of Asian male councillors, no Black male councillors, a few token Black and Asian women councillors, but still we get pitted against one another. And at the same time, women, just as women, you know, have had to struggle, white, black, Asian, whatever, to have a voice. And even when it comes to our trade unions, even on the left, you know, we've been championing these issues, but there is, I think, still a gap when it comes to the senior positions, when it comes to strategic positions, when it comes to actually having authority, having the means to kind of really make those differences. And my own experience in the Labour Party, I have to say, you know, as a woman, as somebody who's been on the left for at least 20 years, and it's not something I would say publicly, but, you know, we're here as, you know, generally Labour women, it hasn't been easy. It's like you either need a male sponsor in the first place, or that kind of gatekeeping attitude in the community, because you have a backlash from certain people within the community might feel threatened or feel, well, why should she, or, you know, this particular individual be getting any kind of support? And how do we support people who then do come under attack from within? Because I know I've certainly experienced that. Whilst I have 100%, you know, my whole politics is about solidarity. So how do we ensure that we, on the one hand, say yes, we want people to come forward, but then we don't allow that kind of pile-on, which we see kind of too often, I think, you know, in politics generally, but especially as women, how do we support one another?
Thank you very much. This will have to be the final question, and I'm going to ask each of the speakers, please, to answer it, but also within the context of their final word. 1 minute, please, because we're due to finish soon. So the question is, included in your summing up, please, speakers, how do we move forward in solidarity and prevent patriarchy dividing us and picking us off and elevating tokenists? Okay, Maureen, how do we move forward in solidarity?
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As women, we need to ignore our differences between each other, but also working together. More events, and they may have different titles, but, you know, where there are events, invite somebody, invite another sister, but we mustn't ignore the men. It's the men who need to be there to push us and to be that strength to put our agenda forward. Where we can't get the voice, they have a role in that as well. Not speaking on our behalf, but making sure that some of those barriers are knocked down and some of those positions that are held by other men are taken by women. So it's only by men giving up things that often women can get them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sarah, please, a minute. How do we move forward in solidarity?
It is just basically supporting each other in everything that we do. If I have a demo, I want to see you all there, sisters. If you have one, I'll be there with my banner. That's physical demonstrations. When we have events, invite each other, as Maureen says. I will be there. It doesn't matter if I have to travel. And I think it is that thing of understanding that as a woman, we are powerful, and we're also special, and don't let the wind get knocked out of you by the patriarchy. And if they are ignoring us, it just means we have to shout louder, and that's what we have to do, because we will not be heard unless we are more forceful. And I know it's not in our nature, it's not how we are socialized to be, but we must be more forceful and we must be more aggressive.
Thank you, Sarah. Gillian, please, how do we move forward in solidarity?
It's not as easy as it sounds, but I would say that we need to become aware of the things that happen to keep us out of those positions. I think there's a lot of backroom organisation going on and scheming and planning and colluding to keep certain people out of positions. So I think we need to get smart about that type of thing. And on the other side, more outreach, more genuine outreach, where we're genuinely interested in what people want from us, and it can be a two-way street. That's all.
Thank you very much. Is Mahmood with us still? Has she gone?
I'm still here.
Yeah, did you want to say something? How do we, please, move forward?
I think
in solidarity.
In terms of us moving forward in solidarity, coming from the background that I have of community organizing, I really feel that we can organize strategically. We can talk about solidarity, but how do we actually build in that solidarity in our everyday lives? How do we empower ourselves to be more effective? You know, we don't want to be labeled as gobby women, or, you know, have women who just like to talk and do nothing. Let's be more organized. Let's be more effective and learn how to be more effective and collaborate the work that we're doing in unity.
Thank you so much for that. Well, perhaps I will say the final word in that. How do we move? Anybody else wanted to say anything?
Yeah, I'm ever so sorry. I've had a hand up for a while. I'm on the Black Lives Matter Working Party on the West Midlands Regional Board. I've got a lot of information relating to the issues you've raised tonight. I was hoping I could have had a couple of minutes just to tell you.
Okay,
give you
carry on quickly.
Okay, well, I'm a member of the 5 members of the Black Lives Matter Working Party. There's a number of union reps on. Maureen will know Asif Mohammed. He's the co-chair of the Black Lives Matter Working Party. It's been set up following representations that Councillor Jackie Taylor made about George Floyd and the fact that black men and women are being ignored within the party and the wider society. We're going to look at the recommendations of the Ford inquiry. We're going to look at what the party is going to be delivering as an equality strategy. We're going to be going and speaking to all Labour groups, each of us, about the work that the Black Lives Matter Working Party is doing, and sending out newsletters informing them of our activities. We're going to explore the reasons why we don't have those black women representing us within the West Midlands. We're going to explore why we lost a black woman MP, Eleanor Smith, president of my union. What happened there? What support did she or didn't she get? You know, lots of difficult issues we are discussing. We've only met 2 or 3 times now, but already we've discussed a lot, and we've got a very ambitious action plan, which includes mentoring, which includes poking and prodding and saying the things that nobody wants to say, by talking about the big elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, which we have started to do, and challenging each other on that as well, and the trade unions, because they have as much to be responsible for as others. So, I mean, that is a very short, I'm not giving it justice, Chair, to be fair, but I just thought I should let you know there is a lot. Pretty much everything you've raised tonight are issues that the Black Lives Matter Working Party is going to address.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you, our speakers, Gillian, Maureen, Sarah and Mahmood, and Judy also, for giving us, my goodness, a real charter for change. And if you did a few of those, Judy, we would see some change. So to basically close by saying what we need to do is to ensure that Black women matter is kept on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.